Greetings, this is Joe Gilmore. It's Saturday, October 16th, 2021, and today is the anniversary, according to Wikipedia, of the recording of Black Sabbath's first album, which was done apparently in one day, back in October 16th of 1969, according to Wikipedia here. It was released, of course, on Friday the 13th in February of 1970. And in this video, I'm going to be talking about Black Sabbath guitar tunings that were utilized in the 1970s. Now, I touched on this topic not too long ago in another video that I decided to delete for reasons which I will not bore you with the explanation, but I'm going to cover the same information I covered in that, but I'm just going to go in. I just figured I might as well go ahead and cover all of the blog here that I did back in 2016, because I still get quite a few hits on this page. So that tells me that there's people that are still interested in this topic. So hopefully some of you who follow my YouTube page channel here will also be interested in it. But, if not, if you're not a guitar player, if you're not a Black Sabbath fan, this may not be for you. So the first Black Sabbath album was recorded mostly in standard E, which you can see in front of you there. And if we want to go by the book, we're going to count from right to left, which would be from the high E string down to the low E string. So it sounds like this. The best way to verify this is to pick a song where Tone Iommi uses the open sixth string a lot. That is the low E string. And NIB is a good song to pick because it's all E. But there's one song that actually is not quite E. It's a bit flat. And it's really just an interlude. It's called Sleeping Village. If you play along to that and you're tuned to standard E, it's going to sound funny because Tone Iommi tunes the guitar a bit flat on that song, and I think I know why. I'm sure most of you watching this are aware that Tone Iommi had an accident before Black Sabbath recorded their first album. And on his last day of work, he sliced the tips of his fingers of his fretting hand. So during the recording of Black Sabbath's first album, he was experimenting with different ways to fret the notes without hurting his fingers, which you wouldn't really know it because he plays so brilliantly on that album. But this is discussed in his autobiography, which I highly recommend picking up. So the song Sleeping Village is played on acoustic guitar. And acoustic guitar, you have to press harder. It's a little harder on your fingers than electric guitar. So I'm guessing that because of that, maybe his fingers were hurting and he tuned the guitar a little lower just for that acoustic section so it wouldn't hurt his fingers as much. Now, it doesn't go all the way down to E flat. It doesn't go a whole half step down. It's just maybe quarter of a step flat. But other than that, the whole album seems to be in E standard tuning. So I'm going to make a correction here. My blog says that Black Sabbath utilized E flat standard tuning in the 70s, which you can see here. It's the same as D sharp. D sharp and E flat are the same note. But now that I'm looking back, I don't think that they were playing E flat tuning quite yet, because E flat is half a step down from E standard tuning. I don't believe they went a full half step down, as I explained earlier. What they did was a much stranger tuning right in between E flat and E standard, probably more like just a flat E standard. So that's a correction I want to make, although I do think that Black Sabbath did utilize E flat standard tuning later. in the 80s and 90s during the Dio era. It's all confusing enough without getting into the 80s era and 90s and beyond. So the album Paranoid is very odd because I just double checked before I did this video, and I went and played along to my earmark repress of the album Paranoid just to make sure that I was double checking. And if you tune to E standard, it's not going to sound quite right because the entire Paranoid album is actually slightly sharp. It's not a whole half step up, probably not even a quarter step, but it's definitely sharp. Okay, so it's not in E standard, but I believe the band was probably playing in a slight either E standard tuning or a slightly flat E standard tuning, and I'll explain to you why I believe that. If you go on YouTube and look for the Black Sabbath Peel sessions, where they play the song Walpurgis. Walpurgis was the original name of the song War Pigs. The lyrics were different, but the music was basically the same. And you'll notice they're basically in that same tuning that they used on the song Sleeping Village on the album Black Sabbath. So my guess is that the band just, went ahead and just started playing in that slightly flat E standard tuning because they were playing more shows, they were getting more popular, and Tony Iommi probably just said, "Hey, look, guys, let's just play everything in slightly flat because that's just a little easier on my fingers." And that's the tuning they utilize in the Peel sessions there. And they also utilize this same tuning at the end of the year on the Paris 1970 recording, which you can also find on YouTube, which is, by the way, probably one of the greatest, in my opinion, heavy metal recordings of all time, period. Definitely worth checking out. But on that recording, they're also slightly flat. So if they're slightly flat before Paranoid was recorded and slightly flat after Paranoid was recorded, all in the same year, that tells me that the album Paranoid was probably recorded in that same slightly flat tuning. So why is it sharp? Why does it sound so sharp? Well, somebody in the studio was probably aware of the fact that Black Sabbath was slightly flat and sped the tape up in order to make them sound like they were in a standard tuning. Now, there's another reason why this may have been done, because let's face it, the music Black Sabbath was recording at that time was very dark and not standard. So someone in there probably said, "Hey guys, these songs are too long, it's too dark," and just decided to speed it up. And we get a little bit of a hint of this when we take note of the fact that the end of War Pigs actually speeds up, almost as if someone was like, "All right, come on guys, the song's too long, let's just end it already," okay? So that's another little hint that someone had their hand on a knob and was pitch shifting things. Okay, so I think I'm probably right about this. And if you happen to have a pitch shift adjust on your record player, or if you have it digitally somewhere and you can adjust the pitch, I highly recommend you slow it down ever so slightly, because I think what you're going to hear is that's the real version of the album that you may never have heard before. So with all that in mind, we can verify the tuning if we play along to War Pigs, which starts with the open sixth string, which would be the low string. So it's the open sixth string, but you have to tune slightly sharp in order to be in tune with the album. And the whole album is like that. It's consistent the whole way through. Now, many years ago, a friend gave me a bootleg that had two bands on it, Black Sabbath and Flying Hat Band, which was Glenn Tipton's band before he was in Judas Priest. I highly recommend checking that out, by the way, if you're a fan of 1970s Judas Priest. But the Black Sabbath half of it was all demos from songs that would later appear on Master Reality. And the interesting thing about it is all of the songs are actually in D standard tuning, which you can see here is D, A, F, C, G, D. And this isn't the tuning that Black Sabbath used on Master of Reality, although there are a couple exceptions, After Forever being one of them. And that would explain why Black Sabbath never played After Forever in the 70s. In fact, I don't believe they ever played it live until 1997 when they had their reunion. Because as a rule, they would use the same tuning for the entire tour, regardless of what song they were playing. So in other words, if they're touring for Master of Reality and they're which was recorded in actually C sharp standard, the whole set would be in that tuning. So if they're playing War Pigs, it's going to sound way lower. So if you listen to those albums and the songs like War Pigs and Fairies Wear Boots and Paranoid sound really odd, that's because they just went ahead and played them in that way low tuning just for convenience. And again, probably because it was easier on Tony Iommi's fingers. The other exception in terms of the tuning being D standard on the album Master of Reality, I believe is Solitude. I believe Solitude is also in D standard. Now, when we say D standard, this isn't the same as drop D. Drop D means you're in E standard and you simply lower the sixth string down one whole step to D. So all the rest of the strings are the same. One string is dropped. That's drop D. So that became really popular in the 90s with the whole grunge movement. Eddie Van Halen also utilized drop tunings if you listen to the song Unchained. But what Eddie Van Halen was doing, they were in E flat standard or D sharp standard. Same thing. D sharp and E flat are the same note as I said. So he would drop the low string down to C sharp for the song Unchained. And I think he even had a little customized, his guitar was customized so he could easily drop down and then bring it right back up. So somewhere between the recording of the Master of Reality demos and then the recording of the actual album, Tony Iommi just went ahead and said, let's go down to C sharp, guys, which is a full step and a half down from standard E. It's very low. This was not normal for the 1970s. And this is a big reason why Black Sabbath stood out so much because, nobody would dare go that low because it just didn't make any sense. We kind of take it for granted now how normal, every other band is just, they're tuned so low, they're tuned to like Z. It's all bass, it's all woof. But when Sabbath did it, this was not normal, okay? So they are considered pioneers for this reason. And it's so entertaining because they were really doing it out of necessity because Tony Iommi's fingers were hurting and, hey, it sounds cool anyway, so let's just go way low. So we're down to C sharp standard, which from top to bottom is C sharp, G sharp, E, B, F sharp, and C. It sounds like this. And if you listen to Children of the Grave, you can hear that, it's utilizing that low C sharp note, the sixth string, which, that's one of Tony Iommi's trademarks is that he rides that sixth string. But in this case, we're tuned way down. So instead of being E or a flattened E or a D, it's actually C sharp. And he does the little acoustic intro in the same tuning. So the whole thing is in C sharp standard. And like I said, they went ahead and played their whole set like this. So, if they went and played, like Paranoid, it would sound way different. Or War Pigs. So you hear how different that sounds, but you know what song it is. But it's just, again, you listen to Live at Last, and that's why some of the songs from the first couple albums sound so odd, because they just said, screw it, we're not changing guitars, we're not changing the tuning. We're just going to go ahead and play the whole set this way. Volume 4 is also in C sharp standard tuning, and one of the easiest ways to verify this is to play along the Snowblind, which utilizes the open 6th or lowest string quite a bit. And if you go to the middle section, this is further confirmed. If you go to that, middle interlude part. You can hear there's a lot of open notes in there. The top 3 strings are open. So those are C sharp, G sharp, and E. You can't play those that way unless you're in the correct tuning. So if you're in the correct tuning and you're playing it correctly, you should be able to do all that with just one finger. So that's just a dead giveaway that we're in C sharp standard. Now the first song on the album, Wheels of Confusion, has a little bit of less of a standard arrangement, but you can still verify that it's in C sharp standard, because in the middle, when it kind of breaks down and gets all trippy, Tony Iommi plays the open 5th string, which in this case would be F sharp. So again, that doesn't sound right unless you're tuned to C sharp standard. So that's where they're tuned on the album. As far as the song changes, I don't know what tuning that is, but it's kind of irrelevant, because I think it's just all piano, isn't it? I hate that song, by the way. Sabbath, Bloody Sabbath is in, guess which tuning? C sharp standard. And it's the very first note they play on the album. Another way we can verify it is by listening to the introduction for the song Spiral Architect. So as you can hear, there's a lot of open notes in there. And again, the open notes are usually the giveaway to the tuning, because you can't have those specific open notes unless you're in a specific tuning. So a little hint on that part right there, you can get away with only using 2 or 3 fingers max to play that part. All the rest is open notes. Sabotage is also in C sharp standard, but the first song on the album, Hole in the Sky, is actually not in, doesn't utilize the 6th string. Tony Iommi rides the 5th string, which would be F sharp. He also does it on Megalomania. As time went on and Tone Iommi continued to refine his system for, utilizing his fingers where the tips were cut off, he apparently was getting better and better at it to the point where he could actually go back up to E standard tuning, which is what the band did in 1976 for the album Technical Ecstasy. Again, a lot of these details are in Tone Iommi's autobiography, which I recommend people read. So, All Moving Parts Stand Still utilizes the fifth string, just like they did a lot on the previous couple albums, even though they were tuned way down. You can see a consistency with utilizing the fifth string, which in this case is going to be A, because we're back in, E standard tuning. And then on Rock and Roll Doctor, they do the same thing. So we're utilizing a lot of open A because, I guess they were getting burned out. Tone Iommi is getting burned out on just riding that sixth string all the time. So he's switching to A and trying different things. If you take the song Backstreet Kids, you get the open low E note, which is, the open sixth string. So you got that low E. Never Say Die is also in E standard tuning, and again utilizes a lot of the open A string on the title track. So Black Sabbath was having a lot of problems during their last two albums in the 70s there, Technical Ecstasy and Never Say Die. I think Ozzy left like multiple times, and there were just a lot of issues. So I don't believe they even toured for Technical Ecstasy. They may have, but I don't believe they did. But there is a pretty famous concert that you can see here on YouTube from the Hammersmith Odeon, 1978. So this was the Never Say Die tour, their last tour before breaking up, and they didn't reform until much later. But as I said earlier, the general rule in the 70s with Black Sabbath was whatever tuning we used on the most recent album is the tuning we use for our entire tour. So any song that they play is going to be in that same tuning. So again, this gets really confusing because if you're used to hearing Children of the Grave in, the C sharp tuning, well, they're going to ignore that. They're just going to play it way up in E standard, and the note's going to be E now instead of C sharp. I don't know if they play that song in this concert, but what they do play is Symptom of the Universe, which, if you're tuned to C sharp standard, is actually E. But since they're tuned way up back to E standard, Tone Iommi, he just ignores the notes and plays it in the exact same position. But since they're tuned up now, playing it in that same position is no longer E. Now it's G. So now it sounds like this. So for me, the song just sounds really bizarre and kind of wrong. And I personally don't really like the way it sounds, but there's a certain attitude to it that's kind of undeniable. It's just comes across very menacingly. And you can hear Ozzy singing a lot lower. Because of the higher tuning, it allows Ozzy to actually sing at a lower octave. So in a way, it actually works better for Ozzy because he doesn't have to sing it as high. But at the end of the day, they're simply playing these songs in this tuning because that's the tuning they're using for the album. Never Say Die. They just stick with the tuning. Snowblind is another one. They play that song on the same concert, and I just don't like the way it sounds. It just sounds really strange in E standard. And the last thing I'm going to mention is that if you go on YouTube and you play along to songs, say someone uploads the entire Paranoid album, or Master Reality, or when you play along to these YouTube videos, you have to keep in mind that they are not always uploaded at the correct speed. In fact, just before I recorded this video, I went and checked, and I found two different versions of NIB that came up one after the other right on the first page results, and one was a different pitch than the other. So if I just went by one, I would have the wrong idea of what the pitch is. So again, the best way to ensure that you're playing it as the band played it is to use the actual CD, the actual vinyl, or an official digital download that is from an official source. That way you're not learning it at the wrong pitch. But regardless, if if all of the information that I gave you here sinks in, you'll always be able to figure out where they're playing, usually by just using the sixth string, the lowest string, as a reference point, or even the fifth string.